Hello and welcome to this video for my Call of Duty Cold War content PC. This is not an instructional video, I'll get that out of the way to begin with, but I am going to take you through the building of my PC, some of the components, maybe some tips and tricks, I don't know. There is a ton of stuff out there for you to look at, to step-by-step guides to build a PC. I haven't built a PC in maybe 5 years now, but I have built a few and helped people build a few. It's not too difficult. So I'm just going to go through it, take it step by step and go pretty slow. I'll give you a look at the components in a second. One thing I will say is if you are ever attempting to build your own PC, read all the instruction manuals, take your time, look through it and don't force anything. It's not rocket science. Things can go wrong, but it's unlikely. This could be prophetic because I'm recording this before I start building. But yeah, I'm going to get ready to build. I'm going to show you as I go through the build, and hopefully you'll kind of see what I'm doing and what's happening. And there are some bits in this PC that I haven't done before, like I haven't really done RGB before very much, so it's a learning experience for us as well. But yeah, I needed a new PC. That I'm enjoying the content grind, so I needed something to help me render a little bit faster, especially when I'm putting 2-hour podcasts up and re-rendering them and doing all that sort of stuff. And it's just basically helped my workflow and help me elevate my content game. As well as play Call of Duty Cold War on PC and any other PC games I choose to, because it was starting to get a little bit slower, like I was dropping off of 144 FPS, and I certainly couldn't record while I was doing that or stream or anything, so it was time for an upgrade. My old PC lasted me about 5 years. It's time to get to the new one. So you won't see me from here on out until maybe the very end of the video if I get everything running and working. I'm going to have an overhead camera and maybe another camera to get some bits closer up. And the rest of it I will voice over because I've had to take down all the old system and everything, and now I've got this this just collection of PC parts for the new one. So nothing really to record on, apart from this mic, which is plugged into my old laptop, recording the audio, and this camera, which is now going to be used to give you a view. But alright, let's get into it and have a quick look at some of the components, shall we? Okay, as you can see here, we are going to start with the MSI Gaming X Trio 3080. We also have a Ryzen 9 5900X, 12 cores in that. The P500A is going to be our case, it is the Drgb version. We have the ROG Strix X570F Gaming, and we have this Sabrent Rocket. This is a 4th Gen 1TB M2 drive. So the very core of our build, should be rapidly fast for booting in and playing games. We also are going to have the Kraken Z33 as our cooler there, 360mm rad. We have several Phanteks fans to add in and a fan hub. We also have some Vengeance Pro 32 gigs of 3200 C16 Ram. Could have gone a little bit faster, but not. We have WD Blue, and to power it we have an RM850 series. So as we go into this build to begin with, the first thing I have to do on this actually is something you don't always have to do with new builds, but because of the new generation Ryzens, it's always wise to kind of flash the board, and by that I mean I am essentially going to power it on and input a USB drive with a new BIOS firmware update on it, and it should flash an update for the needed specs so it can actually run the processor out of the box. I don't know if I needed to do it, but it seemed like a sensible thing to do before I put anything together. This is also something I've never done before, so I was a little bit nervous about it, but it turns out it worked perfectly fine and it wasn't too difficult to actually end up getting done anyway. But something new for me that I've never ended up doing before, so it was an experience, and a little bit nervous because I'm like, well, I'm just powering on a board before I put it in the computer. Turns out really simple to do. Don't worry about it too much if you even need to do it. Let's move on. Now, let's build the motherboard together. First things first, let's get that CPU in. Pretty easy for AMDs. All you got to do is put it in, and there is a triangle on the board and a triangle on the processor. Match those up, be general, stick it in, and it should all be good. Next thing is going to be the RAM sticks. They go in slot 2 and 4. Check whatever you need with your motherboard and what sticks you have. A lot of people go with 4 sticks because it looks nicer. I thought 2 was fine. The last but not least, we are going to put our M2 into this. This is the M2 has to go into the slots. They're actually underneath these heat spreaders with the chipset RAM. Something I actually haven't done before. You didn't have to do this 5 years ago. You just put it straight in. But for me, I took my time, went through it and made sure it was all good. Had a few issues. The RAM wouldn't double click when I first did it, and I was a bit nervous about pushing it down, but as long as it goes down firm, it's fine. And the M2 ended up slotting in pretty nicely. It did have a little bit of trouble, I will admit, when I went to put back the M2 chipset. I didn't keep an eye on which way round it goes, and Ended up getting a little bit confused myself, but other than that, it all went pretty smoothly. It's just screwdrivers and a bit of adult Lego. There wasn't too much trouble at this point in the build, and I was just kind of getting through it. This is actually the easiest bit, I think, putting all the motherboard stuff together. You get the main components on your processor, your M2 and your RAM, and then obviously you just put it into the case. I took my accessories box out. The standoffs were already in the case. The P500A actually had some in, and with Phanteks' little kind of organizer there for screws, very easy to find them, and then you just put them all in, make sure it's all lined up. Don't tighten down straight away. Obviously, if you've ever built anything, you never tighten down to begin with, so you just get them all in, get them all kind of lined up and zeroed, and then slowly go around and tighten them bit by bit to make sure that they are pretty much thumb tight, and you don't want to kind of break the board or put anything down. A lot of common sense when building computers, if you've ever built one. Just make sure you don't do anything too stupid. The next thing I decided to do, which not a lot of people do, was I needed to get out the radiator with the built-in pump and cooler, and obviously attach the new fans. Take off the NZXT ones and put on the Phanteks Drgb ones to match up with the rest of the case. Something you don't need to do if you don't worry too much about RGB, but these fans weren't too expensive. It's about 40 quid to replace them anyway, and from what I hear, they're pretty good fans, as well as the NZXTs, which I probably will end up selling on to somebody that can use in their build because they are pretty decent. So the next thing we're going to do is just obviously end up building this fan here, and it's pretty much just putting the rubber washers onto it and screwing it down into the radiator. Nothing crazy interesting for anybody actually watching or going through this for the very first time, but I think we'll end up skipping past this and trying to get the actual radiator in. So first thing you got to do is I always just double check exactly where I want it to go and how it's going to kind of fit in there as well as check the clearance of the pipes on the AIO and anything else you need to, and end up changing the bracket for it. I actually get a different angle for this one, but it turns out the back plate just fell straight out as soon as I took that bracket off. So it was a little bit of, oh, I need to fix this then, and put it back on. So off comes the back, in goes the back plate, and you put in the new kind of standoffs to make sure it stays in, and you can get that ready for mounting the AIO pump when you need to. First things first, I usually will end up putting in the radiator first. The reason for this is simply because once that's in, then you can position the AIO how you want to. I don't really like it dangling about or moving the kind of tubes too much when it's the other way round, but it worked out pretty well. I also had to change the retention bracket on this from an Intel to an AMD and double checking that it went in nicely, and it did. I was a little bit worried about this one with 4 sticks of RAMs, but fortunately with just 2 it had enough space to go in there pretty simply, and like most things, you just tighten it down corner to corner, bit by bit, making sure that it is an even pressure throughout. I didn't need to put any thermal paste on, it had a thermal pad on it, so I just let that go onto there again. I didn't know the difference of it and what it would end up actually making to it. So next in is the power. Put in the leads you need. This is a modular power unit, 850 watts, so it just needs to have the wires plugged in that you're going to need for your build, and then pretty much affix it to this back bracket and slide it in with all the wires, that big nest that has to go in. It looks a little bit daunting, but it really isn't when you go for it. And once we've ended up doing that, then you end up putting in any other bits you need to. For me, I put into the exhaust fan. It seems like a good time because I know I'm going to do some cable management soon, and once we've done that, then it's moving on. I put the drives in at this point. You don't have to, you can do it after all the cable management and just slot them straight in, but they're on very convenient sort of carriages which slot onto rubber mounts, so I thought I might as well get them mounted, and I can always just take them on and off later on when I need to kind of fiddle about with it for the cables. Really easy job, just a little bit fiddly with tiny screws, but something that needed doing. And then we move on to the cable management. All those fans and the Drgb fans and all the power, everything has to go in at this point. A little bit complicated, like I said before. I've never really done RGB in the past, so I was a bit nervous about this, but it turned out pretty easy. Just daisy chain 2 sets together into 2 addressable headers, and make sure you figure out which is going where. That big wiring loom on the left, I needed to just double check which was which, and then put everything into the fan hub. I had 6 fans going into the fan hub, and I think the exhaust goes into a chassis fan header on the motherboard, so it wasn't too difficult. And once that all was done, we decided to put in the graphics card, the very last thing to go into this build. It's not too difficult. I ended up just double checking something, I think, when we went through it before we ended up putting in, but all you got to do, take out the slots you need to on the motherboard. It's going to go into the first PCIe, make sure the latch is down, put it in solidly so the latch ends up coming back up towards the motherboard, and then all you got to do is tighten it down. Now with this particular motherboard and case and Graphics cards, there is two ways to have an anti-sag bracket. You can actually have one at the back of the case, but I decided to use the front case one that came with the motherboard, that came with the graphics card, sorry, simply because I think it looked pretty good, and this is a very big card. I didn't want it to sag. Not too difficult to get in, a little bit of fiddly to get it to go over all the holes, but once that graphics card is in, that is pretty much the final part of the build. All you got to do is put in the 3 8-pin connectors for the new 3080s, and it will look wonderful. And it leads us on to trying to see whether or not it will boot for the very first time. Alright, well, the PC is completely and totally built. A little bit of a struggle. I had a few ways through. I haven't really done a lot of RGB stuff before, but it worked out alright in the end. Just a lot of wires and figuring out exactly how you should wire it. I just take my time and kind of get through it and make sure I didn't do any mistakes. What else happened that was wrong? This has where you put the power switch onto this one, it has 3 banks instead of 2, which I'm used to, and I wasn't really thinking straight, so I ended up not putting the power switch in the right place, and it wouldn't turn on, and I had a little bit of a panic. Fortunately, I had some friends of mine who advised me, it's like, oh, you've just put it slightly in the wrong place, so that's all good. And then I couldn't install Windows, and that's probably due to me using some old drives. I'd accidentally left a copy of Windows on one of them, and the PC went into that. That all got fixed, though, in the end, so PC's all built. I couldn't be more happy with it, and thanks to everybody who helped out on the way for this one. I do appreciate me getting this built here for as well, so my Cold War content PC is finally ready. And I'm excited. I downloaded Cold War last night, had a few games, incredible FPS, over 200 plus 50, something crazy when I'm playing on ultra settings, and when I put it onto low settings it was just way too high. But I am very much enjoying this. I'm looking forward to trying to render some videos, including this one, which I'm probably going to work on straight after I've recorded this. See how fast the actual rendering for it is. And then, maybe think about upgrades in the future. New monitor, new microphone, little bits here and there about what I need to upgrade to keep bringing better and fresh content to the channel and for everybody who's enjoying these. So thank you all so much for watching this. Hope it's been fun. And maybe you've learnt a little bit for me, but I had a lot of fun building the PC, and it was a kind of a refresher course for how long I've done it since. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.